Blade Runner in court. He weeps and he denies murdering his girlfriend. You're watching the Arise News Hour. That is the story the world is watching tonight. Oscar Pistorius sobs before a magistrate in South Africa. Prosecutors say the shooting was premeditated. We'll have the details.
Also in tonight's program, 2 years since the start of Libya's uprising, we ask why the long shadow of Gaddafi still hangs over the country. Plus, what a relief! It came from outer space at 40 times the speed of sound, the 10-ton meteor that blew up without killing anyone. And Frock and Roll, we preview the global influencers on London Fashion Week.
The gold medal winning Paralympic star Oscar Pistorius sat in court in South Africa charged with murdering his girlfriend at his home near Pretoria. He was said to strongly deny the accusations that the shooting was premeditated. Today, the man known as the Blade Runner said nothing and sobbed audibly.
His girlfriend, Riva Steenkamp, was gunned down in the early hours of yesterday morning. Today, police forensics teams are still at the Pistorius home. Well, the story has led news bulletins all over the world and stunned South Africa. Gavin Hill in London has been watching developments.
South African Olympic and Paralympic star Oscar Pistorius wept in court today after hearing prosecutors will charge him with the premeditated murder of his girlfriend. Riva Steenkamp died after being shot 4 times yesterday at Pistorius's Pretoria home. South Africans are paying their respects to Steenkamp. She was a well-known figure, a beautiful law graduate and reality TV star who campaigned for female empowerment and against violence towards women.
It was such a devastating shock that her whole life of what she could achieve never came to fulfillment. And I just say she's with the angels, and that's about all I can say to you folks.
Back in Pretoria Magistrates Court, an application for bail was postponed until next Tuesday. With his father and brother watching, the track star was told he will remain behind bars at least until then. In a departure from the norm, Pistorius will spend the weekend in a more comfortable police jail instead of in prison.
This is not a special treatment. It was the decision of the court. And we believe that it's fair enough for the accused so that he's able to prepare for Tuesday for bail application, so that he can be able to meet with the defense team and get ready for his bail.
Pistorius' agent has said the Olympian will dispute the murder charge in the strongest possible terms. Whether that defence proves successful or not, this former superstar's global reputation is certainly no longer golden.
Right now, around the world, you must have sponsors, Nike and the other people involved in British Telecom and so on, who must be looking at this with real concern, because your brand image and your brand character and your brand personality and the integrity of that brand and all of the intrinsics and extrinsics of that brand are attached to that personality. And that is always a risk when you use an individual as a brand ambassador.
Pistorius is used to making headlines, and with the world's media waiting for Tuesday's bail hearing, there's every sign those headlines will continue. Gavin Hill, Arise News.
Many South Africans feel the need to protect themselves in their own homes, and this has contributed to the huge number of guns in households. Currently, there are over 1.5 million civilian gun owners in South Africa. That's a total of 2.9 million weapons in their possession. The lobby group Gun Free South Africa is demanding a review of all gun licenses since November 2010. Adele Kirsten, who's the spokesperson for the organization, joined us from Johannesburg earlier. We asked if stricter licensing could have prevented the death of Riva Steenkamp. Adele, again, I do thank you so much for joining us. I think I want to start with this. Allegedly, this incident with Oscar Pistorius and his girlfriend was a domestic incident. Does an incident like this, what does it say about gun control in South Africa?
Well, it's not news in many ways. It's not surprising. This is a very common pattern, not just in South Africa, but globally. And I say that because gun violence is very gendered. So, for example, we know that the majority of guns around the world are in the hands of men. Men are both the primary victims, and they're also the primary perpetrators. So women don't really feature in that scenario. The homicide rate with guns is men 7 to women 1. However, women are very vulnerable to being victims of gun violence in their home, in private spaces, and usually at the hands of someone who is known to them, most often an intimate partner. And that we call that term intimate femicide. And South Africa has one of the highest rates of intimate femicide in the world.
Adele, this is Heather Scott in London. Well, what you say, and given Pistorius' history, do you think he should have had his gun taken away from him?
Well, there would have been the opportunity if anyone, and if any of the women who allegedly were abused by him, they would have had to lay a charge. They would have had to make some kind of report. So again, that's the kind of information that will need to come out. We don't know at this stage. So at the moment, it's for speculation, and in a way, and rather than focusing on him, I mean, this would be the incident or the case for any woman who is in an abusive relationship. If their partner is a firearm owner, they in fact have the right, and I would say the duty, to report, because this is about protecting people from serious injury and death. And this could have saved her life. But at the end of the day, not having a gun, if he'd used any other weapon, the chances are that she would be alive today.
Adele, many who believe in the freedom to own guns, and of course this is a very common issue in the United States where I am from.
Yes.
However, you just mentioned that the gun law that you have on the books, the Firearms Control Act, which was passed in 2000, it has reduced the number of gun odors as well as gun deaths. And also, as I understand it, there are some amendments coming up. Why is that law not sufficient to address the problems of violence and death by guns in South Africa?
That's it's an interesting question. The law's been in place for 10 years. We've seen significant reductions, but it's not enough. We still have 17 people approximately killed every day with a gun. Of course, there's a problem around illegal guns, and so maybe improved policing around search and seizure, of really removing and shutting down the illegal pool of guns. But maybe it's a time, and maybe this tragic incident gives us an opportunity to reflect and pause and say, perhaps this is a time to call for a civilian ban on handgun ownership.
Well, 2 years of instability after the Arab Spring are also taking their toll in neighboring Tunisia. And as Arise News' Jerome Evans reports, the ongoing unrest has stalled the economy and has left some Tunisians feeling nostalgic for the old regime.
The blue and white hilltop village of Sidi Bou Said, north of the capital, was once a prime Tunisian destination. More than 2 years after the revolution, the streets are empty and merchants say they can barely survive. Some are even nostalgic for the stability under the reign of their ousted dictator.
Before the fall of the regime, security was better. It was safe. We could rest easy. Now you can't sleep at night. We can't walk in peace. Our wives don't feel safe in the streets, and I don't let my wife walk alone.
In the capital, Tunis, traders are also taking a hit. The country's been locked in political and social unrest as tensions heat up between liberals and Islamists. And the ongoing protests and street clashes just around the corner from here aren't good for business.
Let them find another place to scream and leave us to our work. Even send them to a small town in a remote corner. Who cares about them? They should let us work. This is the capital, and we have everything here. But when they come, we stop working.
Many are disappointed with the country's new leaders for not doing enough to improve the lives of the population.
Now that they are in control, maybe they are not used to it, maybe they're not professionals. Why did we wage a revolution? Why did people die? To live. To let others take control? It's not normal.
Tourism is a vital sector of the Tunisian economy, representing 6.5% of gross domestic product. Revenue picked up by 30% in 2012 compared to the previous year, but many fear the current instability will continue to lure tourists away. Jerome Evans, Arise News.
Well, these countries in the Arab Spring countries do not need problems which affect their economies, do they, Michael?
They don't need the major parts of their economy like oil and tourism, particularly having to be surrounded by armed people because they need that money so desperately. The interesting thing about tourism is that you get a huge knock-on effect to an economy because it employs people, it means building, it means catering and all those kind of things. And if people actually feel good about a place, then they'll go. At the moment, they just don't need that right now.
And there are plenty of other places they can go.
Plenty of other places to go, of course there are, yes. Now, it seems the world's leading diamond producer is losing its sparkle. Annual profit at De Beers plummeted 45% in 2012. That's as prices and output of the precious gem fell. Still, the company is upbeat about its prospects, saying it sees moderate growth this year. De Beers also unveiled plans to invest about 20 billion rand, that's $2.3 billion US dollars, to build the biggest underground diamond mine in South Africa. Its construction is expected to create 1,000 jobs. De Beers is 85% owned by the mining giant Anglo American. Anglo posted a $1.5 billion loss today after taking a hit from asset write-downs. Well, joining us for more on this is Kieran Hodgson, a mining analyst at Charles Stanley Securities. I mean, there's a lot of worries about the mining industry generally, isn't there, in South Africa? Is this a vote of confidence in it, do you think, by De Beers?
I think De Beers had to do something to show good faith in South Africa, especially with regards to the platinum redundancies or the proposed platinum redundancies, and the future development of the diamond asset of Venetia is a sign of good faith, and I think also a good positive sign towards South Africa in general. There's been a lot of question marks over the viability and the investability of the nation. Despite the resources that it has, there have been a lot of political influences.
Indeed, I mean that's the thing about South Africa as a whole. You know, there has been optimism. It just hasn't really delivered on the potential that's actually there.
Well, there's incredible potential. I mean, the resources in the country are vast, but the difficulty is trying to monetize those assets.
Indeed. Just talk to us a bit about diamonds. So there's a holiday, isn't there, from Diwali to the end of the Chinese New Year, when not many people buy them, which is, you know, quite a few months. But generally speaking, are people not buying as many diamonds as they used to? I always thought, I have to say, that the top end of the market, people bought whatever happens in an economy.
Well, if you ask my wife, she's always keen on her diamonds.
Quite so, you ask mine, exactly the same, yeah.
But I mean, for me personally, as an analyst, diamonds are incredible. I mean, the investment opportunity in diamonds as a whole is probably better than almost any other asset class out there.
Is it really? How does that actually work? Because there isn't, I mean, it doesn't really have a sort of an index like most commodities do, does it? How does it work?
Well, there are actually thousands and thousands of different kind of grades and specialities, but you know, the issue is that there hasn't been a new discovery of an economically commercial diamond mine for over 20 years. And the existing resources are depleting, and the good quality assets are effectively, the best assets have gone. And that will drive prices higher. And the scarcity of demand, and you have demographic changes in India and China, and demand is increasing all the time.
Well, we touched on this at the beginning. Just run through the sort of industrial problems, though, that these kind of mines have, because it must stretch. I mean, it obviously stretches from all sorts of mining in South Africa, agricultural workers too. Is that going to stop the sort of production or halt the kind of production that De Beers would actually want, do you think?
Well, there's multiple issues. I don't think anyone would ever stop producing an asset unless it becomes economically unviable. There are, you know, the issues that many mines have to face are to do with cost price inflation. You have currency issues, but as long as it's economically viable to keep extracting the asset from the ground, the mines will continue to dig deeper.
I mean, do you see it as a successful part of South Africa's economy, given all the problems elsewhere? Because it has considerable problems elsewhere, doesn't it?
It's an important part of South Africa's economy, and it is a successful, and it can be even more successful, but there has to be a partnership between the corporations and the governments.
You said diamonds were a good investment. Do you have to spend a lot to take part in that investment, or can you just buy little ones?
Well, you can buy the companies that produce the assets.
The shares in the companies, that
exactly,
is.
Yes.
I was going to say. Yeah.
And you can also buy a lot smaller diamonds, but I wouldn't recommend the cheaper end. But it's to get exposure, you would probably look to buy the shares in the companies, but then that obviously brings an extra risk. But often the best investment is the one that you can buy your future spouse and leave it on her ring.
I knew you'd say that at the end. Kieran, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very
nice
much.
to talk to you. Now, last night, South Africa's President Jacob Zuma gave his annual State of the Nation address. The country's economy, as we've just been saying, is something of a crisis. Lower than expected growth, high unemployment, and strikes and conflict within its major industries. I spoke to our correspondent, Siddy Bishop, in Johannesburg.
Yes, there are mixed views. It depends on who you're talking to. But the most aggrieved sectors are farming and mining, and with good reason. If you look at the farming sector, the land redistribution policy is one of the very emotional issues in the hearts of South Africans. And the land distribution program has failed completely. The government has not really moved as much land as they would have wanted to the hands of the formerly disadvantaged groups. Now, the government, during the State of the Nation's address, said they will be scrapping the willing buyer, willing seller method, reverting back to the Section 25 of the Constitution that says, should there be a problem in a willing buyer and a willing seller disagreeing on the price of the land, then the courts will settle the problem. The farmers are very unhappy with that. They're saying, you know, if the courts are going to be settling matters, it means there will be a lot of litigation going around, a lot of money being spent on this, and much more time wasted as well.
What about the issue of 11 million jobs by 2030? Are we any closer to that kind of target?
You know, President Jacob Zuma is not the first time that he has promised a vast amount of job creation. In 2009, when he came to power, he promised 5 million jobs in 5 years, and that still hasn't happened. So 11 million jobs, you cannot reach that unless you put incentives into the economy, unless you create conditions of positive conditions of investment. There is no way business can go out on a limb and say we're creating jobs. And during this crisis in the economy, a lot of companies that have reported results right now, it does show that they're declining in production, they're declining in earnings, meaning the economy is also going to be affected. So how do you actually create jobs? There's no guidance on how is he going to create those jobs.
It sounds to me, from everything that you've said, Siddy, very briefly, that there were really no broad policy guidelines at all in this speech.
There were places where there were policy guidelines, but the issues that are contentious in this country were lacking in guidance. He has shifted back his responsibilities to the tripartite talks, which is the government, Labour and business. Most of the time they hold these talks to come up with principles, to come up with policies, and he's shifted every responsibility to them, which will take time before they can come up with policies to say this is what we're proposing, and then he still has to endorse that. So they feel that it's like he's running away from crucial issues. He's comfortable with addressing issues that are not so sensitive to the South Africans.
Siddy Bishop, thanks very much indeed. Now, in African equity markets, Johannesburg, little change. Nigeria ended the week with 4 days of declines as traders took profits. Kenya also closed slightly lower. And in currencies, the rand strengthened against the US dollar, almost touching a 1-month high. Elsewhere, things, as they often are, were broadly flat. In commodities, gold fell to a 6-week low today. Investors have been selling to cover their losses in the equity markets. And a softer euro also weighed on prices. We might see a price of $1,600 an ounce, they say, if the lower level of $1,625 is breached. And just to add to the gold story, billionaire investors George Soros and Louis Moore Bacon have cut their stakes in exchange-traded products backed by gold as futures dropped, most in more than 8 years. Copper was flat, but investors were hoping for a surge of buying. They hope that'll emerge when the Chinese dealers return from holiday next week. That is my business for now, still to come. Now Mr. Buffett's taken a bite at Heinz, does it mean the market is full of beans? I'll tell you that later. Yeah.
Very saucy.
Very saucy.
And we'll catch up with you later.
Very good.
Now, it sounds like the holiday from hell. More than 3,000 passengers on board a cruise liner were left adrift in the Gulf of Mexico for 5 days after an engine room fire knocked out power across most of the vessel. Well, the relieved passengers have now disembarked in Alabama, but many have complained about the lack of sanitation on board. Toilets and drain pipes overflowed, soaking cabins and passageways with raw sewage. Well, for more on that story, plus a lot more, we can join our Washington correspondent, Layla McDowell. Hello, Layla. So it's a bit of a case of sweet home Alabama, wasn't it, for those passengers?
Oh, it sounded like a nightmare. I think the big issue for the 4,200 passengers who had embarked on a paradise cruise that turned into a cruise to hell was getting home last night. The lifeless 14-year-old ship crawled into port at around 9:30 p.m. It took hours to get everyone off because only one elevator was working. Now, Carnival Cruise Chief Executive Jerry Cahill boarded the plane and offered a personal apology, but many of the passengers said that after days of enduring sleeping on sewage-filled mats, limited food, no showers and broken toilets, the apology just was not enough.
Do you say an apology was just not enough? Do you think there's going to be people suing them?
Well, the problem with litigation is that there are limits on what you can sue for. For example, under maritime law, you cannot sue for emotional distress. And when you get a ticket from Carnival Cruise, you waive your rights for certain types of litigation. So there may be real limitations on how much money can be recouped from having survived this ordeal.
Now, they're talking about offering them $500 and another cruise. Do you think anybody's going to want to go on a cruise with them again?
Well, many of the passengers last night were saying they don't even want to hear the name Carnival Cruise again. Carnival also is paying their traveling expenses, but many of the passengers say they will consult with lawyers and see what options they have.
Now, in other news, Dental Records have apparently confirmed that it was Chris Dormer who died in that fire after that that shootout. What's happened? What's the latest on that story?
Well, you're absolutely right. The charred body that was found in the burnout cabin is indeed Christopher Dorner, the ex-police officer who is accused of killing 4 people after penning a manifesto charging the Los Angeles Police Department with racism, corruption, and brutality. Now, the cause of his death has not yet been determined, and police are under some scrutiny for using what they call the burner option, a highly flammable tear gas that caused the fire that engulfed the cabin in flames. And it's not clear who's going to get that $1 million reward, if anybody, because technically it was for information leading to the capture, not the death, of Dorner, who remains a hero and martyr to some and a villain to others.
So what happens to that money?
It's not clear yet. The city is looking to see if they can reward it to someone. Some say the couple that he held hostage for some hours and later escaped and called in the tip as to where he was should get that reward money. But others are saying that the reward money should not go to what some are accusing the police of conducting, an extrajudicial killing of a suspect.
Layla McDowell in Washington, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
Well, in the Russian Urals, 1,000 people have been injured in the first recorded meteor strike in over a century. It hit the Earth's atmosphere at 40 times the speed of sound and thankfully blew up about 20 miles above the Earth. Arise News' Will Took reports.
A morning like any other in the central Russian city of Chelyabinsk. Then, at 9:20 a.m., a fireball streaks across the sky. This traffic camera captured the dazzling white light illuminating the highway as the meteor exploded in the Earth's outer atmosphere. 3 minutes later, the shockwave reached the Earth's surface. The powerful blast set off car alarms and shattered windows across the city. Parts of this zinc factory were reduced to rubble in seconds. Teams of rescue workers were mobilised, but no one was reported killed. Authorities say up to 1,000 people were injured by flying fragments of broken glass.
You can see the result. How many people are here? We've already treated 60 or 70 patients, and we still have a corridor full of people.
Today's meteor isn't thought to be linked to the asteroid NASA expects to pass within just over 17,000 miles of the Earth later today. As for the residents of Chelyabinsk, they've already had one near miss. Will Took, Arise News.
You're watching the News Hour here on Arise. Our top stories this evening. Blade Runner in the dock. South African athlete Oscar Pistorius denies a charge of premeditated murder the day after his girlfriend is shot dead at his Pretoria mansion. Pleas for peace in Libya. Authorities urge calm as thousands are expected to take to the streets on the second anniversary of the revolution that unseated dictator Muammar Gaddafi. And in Russia, up to 1,000 people are hurt, some of them seriously, as a meteor disintegrates above the city of Chelyabinsk.
Still ahead on the program, why number crunchers may be coming to the rescue of the endangered African rhino. But first, that was Nigeria's, we're going to change gears. Now we're going to change gears. Beauty ideas vary from one region to the next. Pale-skinned Scandinavians want a tan. Many darker-skinned people aim to be paler. In Senegal, a new campaign's been launched to discourage the use of popular skin lightening products. This report from AFP.
They say beauty is only skin deep, and that certainly seems the case if these products are anything to go by. Whitening creams like Kespech are hugely popular in Senegal, used by over 67% of the female population. Promising a whiter skin in just 15 days, these products are used all over Africa.
It gives you a clear skin tone. It makes it lighter and therefore more beautiful. If you use too much, there can be consequences. But if you use a reasonable amount, it's fine.
But Noul Cook, which means pitch black in Senegalese, is the name of a new campaign against skin lightening products that's gaining ground. Usually prescribed for severe skin inflammation, such creams limit melanin production, and most are banned in the European Union. Under Senegalese law, creams cannot contain more than 2% corticosteroids. Even so, some products with higher levels are still available in Dakar, leaving thousands of women disfigured.
Firstly, we have to ban these bleaching products because they're drugs. But we also have to raise awareness because women don't know the risks that these products represent.
The Noul Cook campaign has attracted thousands of supporters on Facebook, along with high-profile personalities like actor Awa Senessar and rapper Awadi. Billboards have sprung up around the capital, promoting a sense of pride in being black.
Modern society requires beauty standards which are very different from who we are.
The Noul Cook campaign has already gathered over 1,500 signatures in favor of a ban on bleaching, as organizers hope to promote natural beauty, whether it be black, white, or somewhere in between.
Well, now for a roundup of the day's other stories. And Uhuru Kenyatta will run in next month's Kenyan presidential election. That's after the country's High Court dismissed the argument Kenyatta's forthcoming trial for crimes against humanity made him ineligible for the contest. He's accused of orchestrating violence that killed 1,200 people after last elections in 2007. In northern India, thousands of pilgrims have taken their final plunge in the Ganges as part of the Kumbh Mela. The Hindu festival takes place every 3 years and is the largest gathering of humans in one single place on the planet. And these were the scenes in Bukavu in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where hundreds rallied as part of the 1 Billion Rising campaign. The global movement has held similar events across the world to raise awareness of violence against women.
And our business and economics editor, Michael Wilson, you know who he is, don't you?
Oh,
he's
think
here
so.
to tell us what's driving the markets. Hey, Michael.
Oh, well, indeed. Right, on Wall Street, the move's, well, fairly quiet today. But remember, the S&P 500 and Dow Industrials are trading at 5-year highs right now as investor appetite returns. Now, yesterday, one of the world's most famous billionaire investors, Warren Buffett, got hungry again and bought the baked beans and ketchup company Heinz. It's an historic deal in the food industry, but it's also the latest in a string of mergers and acquisitions in the United States, a total of $158.5 billion worth so far this year. Buffett's Heinz deal was worth $28 billion. Yesterday, we also had confirmation of the $11 billion merger between American Airlines and US Airways. Add to that Michael Dell's $24.4 billion bid for the IT hardware maker that bears his name. Now there's another one, Comcast, $16.7 billion for a stake in NBC Universal, and Liberty Global's $23 billion bid for Virgin Media. And acquisitions feed the financial merry-go-round and also point to a revival perhaps in business confidence. Let's talk to our US business correspondent Chitra Norbat. Do you think that's the case? I mean, this is an extraordinary series of events. Are things going okay your side of the pond?
Michael, extraordinary indeed. Mergers and acquisitions is super hot right now here in the U.S. And you said the statistic, $160 billion in deals so far this year, which is about double last year. And what's happening is, interest rates are still very low. And so companies are taking advantage of being able to get cheap financing. The equity markets are strong. And previously, company executives were reluctant to act because of waiting for the U.S. presidential election and resolution of the fiscal cliff situation. Companies have been building up this cash since about 2009. And when I was in banking on Wall Street, I experienced that. Now companies are ready to spend. They're looking for good ideas, good returns. And one name that we might want to pay attention to is Apple, because they've got about $130 billion in cash reserves. So who knows what they might do next?
Who knows indeed. Now, what about President Obama? He's been talking about immigration, hasn't he? What's he been saying?
President Obama is so focused on immigration as an economic priority. He wants to find a way for the 11 million undocumented immigrants to become citizens. He thinks it's all about human capital and having an educated, skilled, and talented workforce, that is the competitive advantage. And companies, they're complaining that the visa processes take too long. It takes too long to get skilled labor to come to the U.S., and that's a barrier to innovation and productivity. Those who oppose the president on this, they're really looking for more secure borders around immigration.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Because the United States is, of course, a cousin to immigration, was created by it in the first place. Let's talk about this Toyota deal. Now, is this Toyota settlement the final thing? Because this was one of the worst problems in automobile history, wasn't it?
That's right. Toyota is settling this lawsuit, $29 million in 29 states. So hopefully it is the final settlement. And you may recall they had an issue with their accelerator in their cars. Toyota is actually the #1 car purchased among African Americans, and they were accused of not informing customers on a timely basis about this issue. The cars were actually speeding up unexpectedly. Toyota had to recall about 16 million cars in the U.S. between 1998 to 2010. And this is considered the biggest auto safety crisis in history.
Drive safely over the weekend. See you on Monday or Tuesday, whenever you're back. Nice to talk to you. Now, the G20 meeting in Moscow has been wrangling over a form of words which tries to say that none of the members wants to manipulate their own currencies to get some competitive advantage in these difficult times. It's all an exercise, of course, in doublespeak. In slightly more real terms, sterling hit a 6.5-month low against the dollar after retail sales fell unexpectedly, reviving recession worries and adding to the gloom about the outlook for the pound, which has been under pressure since the middle of the week when the Bank of England forecast higher inflation and weaker growth. Meanwhile, share markets broadly flat following dismal gross domestic product data from across the Eurozone yesterday. The surprisingly sharp contraction in the region's economy during the final 3 months of 2012 has undermined hopes of an early recovery from recession, though it's also boosted talk that the European Central Bank may have to ease further. It's felt that any fallback in prices will be temporary. That's the interesting thing. I mean, the markets still have risen considerably since the beginning of the year, and a little pullback's a little pullback. The fact of the matter is there are billions of money in that's what Chitra was saying, really, the United States. There's a load of money on the sidelines there, there's a load of money here, there's a load in most of the European markets, and of course in Africa too, which is waiting for a decent investment. What that is, I wish I knew.
And when it would come, right?
Exactly, quite so. Diamonds, you see.
I still don't understand about the diamonds. Why are they going down? I still like them.
Because you're not in the market at the moment. I'm sure when you get back
like
into it.
I very much like to be.
Oh, good for you. That's excellent.
I think that was a hint.
Yes, it may well be. Yeah.
All right, Michael, thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
See you. Well, now Nigeria has set its sights on becoming a global powerhouse in food production. Minister of Agriculture Dr. Akewumi Adesina says a revolution is underway to increase the prosperity of the nation's millions of poor farmers. This has meant tackling corruption and using the latest mobile phone technology, as she explains.
The problem in Africa is we spend most of our money importing food. When we do that, we export jobs, and we don't create the domestic industry to actually, make the economy grow. We've got, 14 million farmers that are in the country. Majority of them are poor. It doesn't make any sense to me, because we have 85 million hectares of land. 40% of that is utilized. No more than 10% is utilized optimally. So Nigeria should actually be a global powerhouse in food. Today, we are a net importer of food. We spend $11 billion importing basic things like wheat, sugar, fish, and it doesn't make any sense. And so we've decided as a government that we will diversify the economy away from oil, that we will use agriculture to create robust growth that is able to create jobs. Now, to do that requires a total shift in how we look at agriculture, and we did. I don't believe agriculture is a development activity. I don't believe that we can manage poverty. I don't believe that we should be in that business of poverty reduction. I think we should be in the business of creating wealth for a lot of people. So that means agriculture for us fundamentally is a business. Whether it's a seed company, fertilizer, storage, processing, logistics, transport, competitiveness in global market, that's my job. My job is to make Nigeria's agriculture to become like Brazil. And I think I've been prepared for that all my life. When I became minister, I inherited a system that was very, very corrupt. For 4 decades, Nigerian government bought and sold fertilizer. And as the fertilizer was bought and sold by government, it was like a leaky pipeline. Fertilizer goes in this way, it never comes out the other side. 11% of farmers were getting the fertilizer bought and sold by government. So in other words, people were selling sand as fertilizer, people were selling undersized bags, and so government literally was subsidizing corruption, not subsidizing farmers. And so what we did, it took 90 days under President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, when I became minister, for us to actually dismantle 4 decades of corruption in that sector. How did we do it? We took the government out of buying and selling fertilizer. So we started the first ever registration of farmers in the country. We put together a database in our first year, 4.2 million farmers with full biometric information. This year we'll do 5 million farmers. Next year we'll do 5 million farmers. So in 3 years, we'll have covered all the farmers in the country. Know your customer. So you can know who the farmers are, where they are, what your farm sizes are, what do you grow, and what are your financial needs, so that we can target our things better. And then what we did was we took the technology of the mobile phone to be able to circumvent the rent seekers. And so we registered our farmers on their mobile phones, and we send them electronic vouchers for money, by subsidies for seed and fertilizers directly to them on their own mobile phones. And they pay the balance. We give them 50% subsidy, and then they pay the cash of 50%. They go to the import retailer, they pay their money, they collect their bags of fertilizer and seed and walk away. There's no minister, there's no local government chief, there's no politician in the system. For the first time as a country, as a minister, I can tell you who got what seed or fertilizer, when did they get it, where did they get it, how much did they pay, how much did the government pay. Nigeria is the largest producer of cassava in the world. 40 million metric tons. But we account for only almost 0% in terms of global value added. And so we have a big project now in Nigeria, in Kwara State and in Kogi State, to do 25,000 hectares under cassava with a starch plant, sweetener plant. That is how you unlock money. Now, what we're witnessing in Nigeria today is an agricultural revolution. An agricultural revolution because it's market driven. And in the last 1 year, we've been able to attract $8 billion of private sector investment into this particular space. Today, we are exporting. We've started with contracts to China, 2.2 million metric tons of dry cassava chips going to China. We've started with oil palm plantations, recapitalizing that. Cocoa, for example, last year, we gave 3.5 million metric tons of hybrid cocoa to our farmers. That comes down to 144 million seedlings of cocoa. Why? I want to grow our cocoa sector from 250,000 metric tons today to 1 million metric tons of cocoa. We're the largest importer of rice in the world. And we can grow rice every part of Nigeria. In the last 1 year since we started, 14 new rice mills have come up, private sector owned. They have a capacity of 240,000 metric tons. It's about 1/10 of what we currently import. And in the next few years, we're going to spend $800 million to acquire first-rate technology from China to do long-grain parboiled rice. So by 2015, we will have in place for the first time as a country the full milling capacity to mill all the rice that we currently import. And why not become an exporter? It is a revolution, and we are not treating agriculture as a political issue. For me, it's a business. Nigeria has to be a big player in that, and all these things that we are doing is for that.
Well, that was, of course, the very male Nigerian agricultural minister, Dr. Akiwumi Adesina, talking about all his plans for Nigeria's agriculture. You're watching Arise News Hour. Now, despite the continuing threat from the militant Islamist group Al-Shabaab, Somalia continues to make strides towards developing its infrastructure. Well, for the first time in nearly 2 decades, the Somali people will soon have their own fire service. Arise News East African correspondent Tom Walsh has that story.
This is Mogadishu, but it's not the aftermath of yet another Al-Shabaab attack. This is history in the making. Meet Somalia's national firefighting team, the first in over 22 years since civil war broke out in 1991. For recently trained fireman Abdullahi Muhammad, it's a proud day for him and his country.
We could be real firefighters, and the grassroots and the Somalians, they will depend on us.
The 16 Somali trainees have recently completed an intensive training course in partnership with the African Union Mission in Somalia, AMISOM. Ugandan instructor Lieutenant General Charles Luero has been teaching the cadets the essential skills in what is an important part of restoring peace and democracy in this war-torn region.
Their morale is too high because they have got a chance they never expected, and they have been having a problem with fires in town. And by the time we come, their property, everything is gone. So they are looking forward to see that they can grasp whatever they grasp so that they can fight that fire.
While the recently trained team may be small in number, for Mohammed Noor, the mayor of Mogadishu, this achievement is a sign of positive progress.
We're very proud to have these young people that start to be a firefighters department for the region of Banadr. It's a great day for us, it's a great day for all of us. And thank you very much for the well-done job.
5 of the 16 graduates will now be sent to Kenya for further training in what many see as the first step in rebuilding the country's public services. Tom Walsh, Arise News, Nairobi, Kenya.
Here's one for all those children out there that think they'll never need algebra once they finish school and they're out in the real world. Well, mathematicians from the world's best universities gathered recently in South Africa, and as Arise's Tina Millman reports, they are crunching some numbers that just might help save the endangered African rhino.
Africa's biggest animals are being killed in record numbers.
as Asian demand for horn drives the slaughter of rhinos and elephants ever higher. 6 weeks into 2013, and this is just one of the 82 African rhinos killed so far. With a kilo of rhino horn worth up to $500,000 in Asian shops, efforts to save the endangered animal become a numbers game.
I think the models that we provide will allow the policymakers of the country to go and determine whether an open and free market is a suitable thing to go and do to change the problems associated with rhino poaching.
The mathematical models take into account the value of a poacher's life, the cost of keeping the rhino safe, and the worth of the rhinos to tourism. Conservationists say the formula will help them decide whether it's a good idea to legalize the trade.
Maths is absolutely essential. The models are absolutely essential in understanding this and doing the number crunching, because there are a lot of people who argue one case or another case, but unless you actually sit down with the numbers and run them through the model, you're clutching at straws. And it turns out that if you change the variables, you will get different results. So it's important that we get those models right and then start to run them with numbers that we have, things that we know about how much it costs to protect rhinos effectively and so on, to determine what would happen under different demand scenarios.
Most of the rhino killings take place in South Africa's Kruger National Park, a large area that rangers are finding difficult to patrol. Tina Millman, Arise News.
You know what's so interesting? First of all, it's very interesting to use math to solve the problems of wildlife. But I found out that poaching has increased 20% over last year. It's the worst year in history. So it's really neat.
The rhinos, they're losing rhinos, and it's just, they don't even want the rhino, they just want the rhino horn, and they just cut it off and leave the animal to die.
It's such a waste.
It's
and what's so
horrendous.
cool about that story is that it's an innovative approach.
Absolutely.
Hopefully it will make a difference.
Yeah, keep on counting. We're counting on them.
Yeah, counting on them. Very good.
Right, sport now, and all eyes will be on Roberto Mancini this weekend as his Manchester City team face Leeds United on Sunday. City are already 12 points behind rivals Manchester United in the Premier League. Well, Mancini has come under fire for his side's recent performances, and a loss in the FA Cup to Leeds could spell the end of his job at the club. Roger Federer gave up just one break point during his AMRO World Tennis Tournament in Rotterdam last night. Now, the defending champion eased past Tiago de Baca 6-3, 6-4, and is now in the quarterfinals. The South African golfer Jaco van Zyl overcame windy conditions at the Africa Open in East London to take the lead after day one yesterday. Well, the gusts got so bad that play had to be suspended after balls began moving on the greens. Now, van Zyl has now slipped down into second place with Brazilian Adelson da Silva on top.
To stay with golf, there were some uninvited guests that caused quite a stir when they turned up at the Women's Australian Open in Canberra. Take a look at this. During the tournament that featured 10 of the world's top 20 golfers, everything seemed to be going smoothly. The sun was shining, the putts kept on coming, and it was high fives all around. But when teenage amateur Lydia Ko slotted this spectacular eagle on the 15th hole, a few furry spectators couldn't control their excitement. A mob of friendly kangaroos caused chaos as they hopped onto the course. Bouncing their way through the fairways, the roos really seemed to be enjoying the tournament. But unfortunately for our fluffy friends, they broke the rules of the course. Spectators must not walk on the fairways. And so, without further delay, the kangaroos were asked to leave. Unfortunately, they won't be making the cut for the next round. So adorable. Well, it is London Fashion Week, and the gods and goddesses of style and beauty have descended on the UK's capital city. And Stephanie Tecci is a lifestyle blogger and joins us right here in the studio, straight from a fashion show.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me what you've seen so far today.
Yeah, I have seen so many different designs for autumn winter. It's just amazing. Like, obviously we're looking to head back to more kind of gothic tones for autumn winter from September. There's a bit of psychedelic prints as well, got a lot of Afrocentric prints as well have hit back onto the catwalk as well. A lot of fur. I'm a fan of fur, so it looks like the fur's coming back big and bold.
Real
next
fur?
season.
Real fur?
No.
Oh,
I just
okay.
interviewed, the last show I went to was Belle Savage, and I just interviewed the designers. I was like, you guys have used fur? They were like, nope, it's all fake, don't worry, because I think that would cause more controversy.
If it was in Paris or Milan, it would be real fur.
It definitely would be real fur, because they're all about their elegance, they're all about the quality, and there is something about real fur that gives it more that prestige than fake fur.
And I heard you say, Stephanie, that you saw a lot of African-inspired fabrics and designs, but what about any emerging African designers? Any for this fashion week for the fall?
Well, the disappointing thing is it's never about the catwalk with the African designs. It's more about the celebrities that you spot wearing the Afrocentric designs. And what tends to happen is, like, you've got your Rihannas, your Solange Knowles, your Gwen Stefani's, and even Jamie Foxx has been seen at fashion shows wearing Afrocentric designs. And what that does is create a buzz about the designers behind them. So we've got new emerging designers such as David Loyne, Oswald Boateng, who's obviously more established. We've got clothing, and we've got jewel designs as well. So people like that are coming up, which is creating more.
Can you see a time when an African designer will become as big as, say, an Armani, a brand, a world brand like Armani, for example?
I think so, because in like last year, December, Ghana had their first fashion week, and it had so many people turning up from like Vogue, from America and all that stuff. So for many years now, people have been going to Africa to be inspired by the design. So it's only a matter of time before someone is big enough to be like, I can stand by my own, and you guys should come to me rather than me come to you.
We want to show some pictures to our viewers of the New York Fashion Week. We want to make sure that they understand that. Is there a big difference, or what is the difference, particularly between, say, New York's Fashion Week and London's Fashion Week?
I think with New York, they've got more of a commercial edge to their fashion. They play it very safe, where if you're looking for the trendsetters, it's all about London. London is where they come to be inspired. London, we don't play it safe. We'd rather be reckless, and you've got your heritage brands like Vivienne Westwood, Alexander McQueen, your Oswald Boatengs, who just think out of the box. So I think that's the difference that you will find here.
And if you can see the pictures looking there,
amazing.
How is these fashions that you're seeing here on this video different than what you've seen today?
I think with these kind of designs, they're very cut, they're very clean, and they're very kind of fine. Where the designs I've seen today have been very raw, very edgy, very in your face. And that's very much about London fashion, we're in your face.
Yes, they kind of, and people out there are watching, and they just take something, an essence of it, rather than necessary cut. Although, I mean, Vivienne Westwood was punk, and that really took off with the safety pins and all that. Back in the day.
Totally, and those kind of designs, it's like they move onwards with London. We don't kind of stick to one thing. Like one season it could be all about Afrocentric prints, but next season it could be more futuristic. Like last season it was all about space designs and stuff.
Sorry, you were talking about famous people wearing Afrocentric, but Rihanna has been out her own fashion label for River Island, which is a UK store.
That is going to be the most biggest story of London Fashion Week, because she could have done it in New York, she could have done it in Milan, she could have done it in Paris, but Rihanna said time and time again she's a big fan of London fashion, and especially for a high street brand like River Island, which is very fast thinking and very forward thinking as well. She's picked the right brands for that, and I think the team together, them working together, would just be a fab collection.
Have you gotten a sneak peek? Have you seen any of it?
Tomorrow is the big show, and she's actually online. She's revealed some pictures of like a blue tracksuit from it, which is velour. It's really safe, but I think knowing Rihanna, it's going to be very sexy, very saucy, and I think all eyes are going to definitely be on London tomorrow.
If I can jump in, the fashions that we see, are they going to be made for what I want to call real women, not those stick-thin model bodies, but you know, bodies like we have.
Like me. I wish I could start a petition for that, because today all of the designs I've seen have been, you know, the models have been stick thin, like size 6, size 8, which is nothing wrong. It's fair enough, but give the big girls love like us. But actually on Saturday we'll see the beginning of the alternative, which is plus size fashion weekend. Now this is an initiative that's been raised by a stylist and a designer, because they just had enough. They're being plus size girls themselves. So what this weekend's going to do, it's going to promote the models who are of plus size from size 12 upwards, the designers who are making for the plus size ladies, but it's not going to be cheap, because there's this thing where you think because it's plus size, it's not got that high-end fashion thing to it. This is what this weekend's going to do. It's going to represent high-end fashion for plus size models.
Sophie Dahl really let the side down, because she started off beautiful, big, gorgeous, and then she lost all that weight.
I think it's always different when you're in the limelight. You have to be a very strong woman to be like, this is my size and I'm going to stay with it, because in Hollywood you've got a lot of people who are like size 10 and that's considered fat. So I think for her the pressure got to her, and then what happens is a lot of these celebrities, they lose their weight and they'll be like, oh, I had to do it for a role or for health matters, and it's just, you seem less glamorous if you're plus size, where really we've got curves for a reason.
All right. Exactly. Well, Stephanie Tisha, thank you so much.
It was lovely meeting you guys.
Of course, Fashion Week is going to be going on all next week, and we are going to be covering it, bringing you the highlights from it. And of course, you'll be able to see many of the fashions in our sister magazine, Arise Magazine. Stephanie, again, thank you. We're going to leave you with some more scenes of New York Fashion Week. Enjoy them and have a great evening and a great weekend.
Yeah, even the skinny ones.
No.